My name is Katie Baker. I'm here to talk to you today about the Janome 6700P. I get a lot of questions about this machine in particular, or ask what kinds of machines people recommend, and I always have a long list of things I want to say about it. And I figured I'd make this video, really streamline it, show you what I'm talking about, and just have this available for people. So a little background about me. I started sewing maybe about 7 years ago now. I started as a quilter. This is one of my quilts back behind me. I don't really piece anymore. We'll get into that in a minute. But I have pieced. I know what makes good piecing. It's just not something I currently do anymore. I also fell in love with free motion quilting. I'm not sure you can see the detail of that on this quilt, but I did a lot of free motion quilting on this quilt, and I've moved it on now to my bag making. So you can kind of see it here. There you go. So I still do quite a bit of free motion quilting, and obviously bag making, and I'll talk a little bit about what makes this machine great for bag making. And then I, in the last year, have gotten into garment sewing. So this is a dress I sewed a couple weeks ago using bamboo fabric, and I can talk a little bit about the tips and tricks and why I love this machine also for garment sewing. So stay tuned, and I'll give you some insight about what makes this machine just great and the perfect machine for me. Okay, let's start by talking about why I bought this machine in the first place. So I bought this machine in December of 2019. I had a machine I loved, but as I was getting more into bag making, and it didn't serve the kinds of bags I wanted to make anymore. And so it was time to trade in, try something new, and this really has been the right machine for that. We'll talk about what makes this one great in a second. But so I bought this in 2019, and the things that I loved about it, the things that drew me to it, were the heart space. So there is 11 inches from the needle to the end of the harp here, which is great for free motion quilting. There aren't that many machines on the market that are like full-fledged machines rather than like sit-down long arms that are much bigger. Janome has the new M7, which I believe has 13 inches, which is awesome, but it is also significantly more expensive. So 11 inches was great for me. I can fit a lot of quilting in there, and that was one of the key reasons I looked at this model rather than some of the others. The other thing is that it's got a built-in walking foot mechanism. This is called the AccuFeed Flex. I'll talk more about these feet in a minute because they're a big reason that I bought the machine, and I have some tips for it. But the AccuFeed Flex is just a great addition to this machine. It's one of the reasons I really bought it. It's really critical for the bag making, in my opinion, but it's also amazing for quilt making. And honestly, I use a built-in walking foot for nearly every seam I sew. The AccuFeed Flex does come off. My old machine, which was a Janome 7700, some of the old Memory Craft Janome machines had it more literally built in, and you couldn't take the walking, like, top feed dogs off, and they did sometimes get in the way. The new AccuFeed Flex, which is what's on all of their new machines, it's a separate piece, and so when you take this off, there aren't any components left on the machine, but it's still much nicer and less, like, incorporates better than a separate walking foot in particular, because there are variations on them, which I will show you in a minute. So the built-in walking foot was a huge reason I bought the machine. I also really like that it's not straight stitch only. A lot of the people both in the quilting and bag making arenas love the straight stitch only machines, and I understand why. They're very powerful, they're very good at what they do. However, I want to sew knits like this dress, and so I need the zigzag component, and I didn't want a machine that couldn't do that. Additionally, I have a thing for vintage machines, and most of those are straight stitch only, so I've got straight stitch covered, and I really wanted something that included garment appropriate stitches. Here you can see the Janome 6700 piece stitch options. I mean, this isn't really close up, you can look up the official ones, and then there are some alphabets. There's not, it looks like there's about 200 stitches plus the alphabets. So it's not like some of the machines have way more, but I've never personally encountered a stitch that I needed that it didn't have. It also has this nice way of seeing them. It's like a little, and it has a little clipboard, and I keep a post-it note which reminds me what needle positions I need things to be at with which feet to get the seam allowance that I want. And it has just a little way of holding that here, but you can always take it off if it's in your way, or if it bothers you. I'll take my little post-it note off so it's not glaringly orange in the background. So I really liked that. That's what made me think that this was the right all-in-one machine for me to do the quilting and the bag making and the garment making. I didn't want to have separate machines for each of those things, and so I wanted an all-in-one. I didn't want an industrial machine that took up more space in my sewing room, because space is at a premium in here, so that's why I went with this one. I also really love the extension table here. You can see how wide it is. It's there's markings for 18 inches, but then a couple more inches on each side. So I'm gonna guess it's probably about 24 inches wide. And I couldn't tell you how deep it is, but I guess I have rulers right here, so may as well use them. Looks like it's about a little more than 14 inches. So it gives a really nice sewing space. Janome and other retailers do sell tables that it can fit into. I've looked into them. They're quite expensive, and so I haven't pulled the trigger yet, and I don't know that I will, because I actually find that the extension table works well enough for me. If you're quilting large quilts, that might be a good reason to put it into a table. And it doesn't have a free arm, so you're not going to lose that capability by putting it into a table. I personally don't miss the free arm. It's true that none of my vintage machines also have a free arm, so I do not have the ability to do that at all in my studio. However, I've found that it's easy enough. Okay, this is going to be a weird example because I've got these free motion quilting gloves. If I'm trying to do in the round, I find it easy enough to, usually I have it inside out, and to sew it like this from the inside. I don't know that you can see that. And go around that way, and I haven't had a problem. My last machine had a free arm, but it was so wide and so bulky that something small and narrow like that wasn't going to get around it anyway, and so I have already adapted to sewing in the round differently, and I haven't missed it. The other thing I forgot to mention is it's got like a built-in cone stand. I don't know that you can see that. There's this thread guides and cone stands. For most domestic machines, you need a separate piece to unwind your cones and go around it. They're too big for the thread holder, but this machine can actually hold 2 cones, which is really convenient because I do buy cones. I go through so much black and white thread between mostly the bag making that's perfect for me. I love not having an extra thing on this table. I've cleaned it up for this video, but generally there is no shortage of things on this table, so I'm glad to have that up and out of the way, and I was able to lend it to a friend who needed it. So I really like that feature too, although I realize that's a little specialty, but it's cheaper to buy your thread and cones in bulk if you have it. So anyway, next I'll talk to you about what some of the key selling features are. Those were the reasons I personally bought it, but there are some other great things that are worth knowing if you're thinking about getting this machine. Okay, let's talk about a huge convenience. One that it wasn't a selling point for me, but I've really fallen in love with now that I have it, which is that the needle plates pop in and out without using a screwdriver. You know how you usually need the tiny screwdriver and you can't quite fit your hands under in this space right here? No more. It's awesome. I'm sure you can't see it, but there's a button on the side, on the bottom of the machine under the extension table when you have it. You press the button and the needle plate pops out. It's amazing. I love it. It's so good. And it makes me way more likely to clean out my bobbin case, which is a habit I should be better about doing, and I think that a lot of us could be better about doing. So the fact that it's easy is amazing. It comes with 3 needle plates, so I almost always use this zigzag one. It has a big, it has this big 9mm spot for the needles to go through, and it works really well. And I love having 9mm of width. My last one had 7, which was fine, but 9 is even better. It also has a straight stitch one where you can see there's a hole in the middle and then a couple on the side, but it doesn't have the big opening across. That is great for piecing or free motion quilting, or when you're just doing straight stitches, and it means it's less likely to grab your fabric and pull it down into the feed dogs. I'm sure you've had that happen to you before. There are ways around it. I have a couple suggestions too. It doesn't happen to me terribly often with the zigzag plate, but the straight stitch plate is perfect for that. And then this is really cool. A bunch of the Janome machines have this, but this is my first machine that has it. It's got this HP plate, and they call this, that stands for high performance. It's got this one opening, and this is meant to go in conjunction with the HP foot. So the HP high performance foot is meant to be perfectly calibrated with this plate for you to do the 1/4 inch that you need for piecing. This is meant for quilt piecing, and it's really ingenious. If I pieced more, I know I would really love it. I don't currently, and I don't therefore need to often do a very exact 1/4 inch seam allowance, but I know other people really love it. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I'm sure that there are videos here on YouTube of people who can talk more about their personal HP experience and show you how it works. But I love this as a concept, and I'm hoping to get more into it because they also sell a walking foot version of the HP foot, and I'm thinking I'm going to get it. I haven't yet, but I really, really love the walking feet, and I think I would really enjoy having a 1/4 inch walking foot. So those are the needle plates. Look at the camera, Katie. Those are the needle plates. They work really well. I love how easy they are to just take in and out. So you saw me take it out. Let's put my right one back in. To put it back in, you just snap it in. And the machine can tell which well, here, I'll show you. Which one you have in, and so if I have the so I have this straight foot in there, it's telling me to make sure the straight needle one. It's telling me to make sure I have the right foot, and it can tell right here, it says straight stitch plate. I know you can't see it, but it won't let me do a zigzag stitch. It just won't. That would make me break a needle. It's not going to work, and it doesn't let me do it, which I really, really appreciate, because nobody likes breaking needles. So anyway, I'm going to stick this back in, and we're ready for anything. Another feature that's really amazing is the auto tension on here. Here's the tension knob. And I guess it doesn't technically say auto on it. My last one did. This one doesn't. But I find that I have to mess with the tension extremely infrequently on this machine. I go between quilting cotton and the faux leather that I use for the bags and the clothes, and change tension almost never. Now, I'm sure that there are situations in which you would have to, but I'm really impressed at how well it works. I am using the same thread in the bobbin as I am for the top thread. I know that can cause some trouble if you're mixing and matching sometimes, but I almost never mess with the tension, and I love that so much. It also very clearly tells you how to thread it. There are illustrations right on here so that it's extremely clear and there are no questions about if you're doing it right. If any of the rest of you have experience with vintage machines, as much as I love them, it can sometimes be a long and winding path to get the tension in there, and often you still have to mess with it. I love how, like, grab and go this is with whatever thread I want to use, and it goes, and away I'm ready to sew. I've already talked about the variety of stitches. I think it's a great number for me. It's got the straight stitches, it's got some locking stitches, it's got some zigzags, it has some buttonholes, and it has some decorative stitching. Not like an enormous number, but like more than adequate. For me, there are also stitches that are like specifically, I don't know if you can see, these are specifically for the straight stitch plate, and these are the only ones that'll let you do with the straight stitch plate, and for the HP plate, and those are specific to that, which is really nice because we talked about breaking needles not being any fun. So that's been awesome. My last machine had this as well, and I could never go back. This is the extra high foot lift. So when my foot is down here, you know, this is what it would be if you sew. There's a 1 up, and that gives you, you can measure it. Let's see. I'm sure this is available in some of the promotional material, but I can't really get in there and measure it very well. Like a little under 1/4 inch of height, but then you can click it again, and now it's 1/2 an inch almost, not quite because I have to tilt this to get it in there. But I do believe it's like double the amount of height. Now you can't then like sew at that height. I mean, you'll have to push it all the way back down, but it does mean that you can get much thicker things under there, which is great for if you've got some bulky seams for your piecing, or in particular, I use it for bag making. In bag making, we are always worried about how thick the seams are getting, and so having that extra height is just amazing. I could not do without it. It's so good. I believe that this machine also has a stronger motor than many of the other domestic machines that Janome makes. I don't really have any intuition on which motors the other ones have and how things compare, so you can look maybe at some of the promotional material for that, but I have found that it has gone through everything. It just keeps chugging along. It's amazing. It also can go quite fast, which is really nice. I do like to sew fast, I have to say. And right now I have it's got this speed adjuster here. I often have it at full speed because you can control it with the foot pedal, but sometimes I do have to turn it down because the thing can move. So that's really awesome. It does have a knee lift that's included. I don't personally use a knee lift, so it's sitting in a cabinet over off screen, but it does have a knee lift if that's something that you use or is important to you. If you've never used one before, it's absolutely worth trying. I just personally find that my leg never is in the right place to use it. I've never learned to adjust myself properly for knee lift use, and I'm sure it would take very little practice for me to get there, but I haven't missed it, and so I don't really use it. It's also got a very large pedal. It's down there, I'm not going to grab it, but it's probably about twice as wide as a normal pedal, and it makes it very easy to have your foot on it and like make sure that you have the pressure that you want. It's really nice. So, and then this is awesome, although it involves having a little more foresight than I ever have. It has an independent motor for the bobbin winder, which means that you can be sewing and winding bobbins at the same time, provided that you have a different thread and a different bobbin, obviously. But you can be doing both at the same time, which is awesome. It also winds the bobbins really quickly and does a really nice job with that. As I said, I often lack the foresight. Usually when I need a bobbin, it's in the color that I already have going, and so I end up having to unthread and do that. But if you use the same colors, like a couple colors over and over again, which I do, and actually I'm due for some new cones, so maybe I should buy the new cones now and like just keep these mostly empty cones for just bobbin winding, but you can do that independently if you want, and that is awesome because nobody likes to sit and wait for bobbins. I think I've talked myself into buying new cones. Perfect. I needed to do that anyway, So anyway, those are some key features, things that people, including me, really love about this machine. You can see more of that. Those are the ones that just came to me based on what I use and love. There are definitely more features and more details if you look at more official Janome material. I'm just a person who uses it, and this is my perspective of the things that I really love. So feel free to look that up and see if there are other things. If you have questions about a feature, feel free to leave it in the comments and I will try to answer them. I know that this has been a popular machine, and so chances are pretty good someone has an answer to your question if you have it. So feel free to leave a comment and I will strive to be useful and answer them for you. Alright, next I'm going to talk about some tips that I've learned, some less official descriptions, things that might help you in your sewing adventures with the 6700P. Okay, first tip I have is about needles. So from my last machine I had bought like a bulk box of Schmetz needles like this. I think that's a set of 100. And when I brought this machine home and I started using those needles, I noticed a lot of skip stitching. And at first I was terrified because it was a brand new machine and I didn't want to like have it be a lemon, but I also didn't want it to be skipping stitches. But I noticed that it didn't skip stitches when I was using the needles that came with the machine. So the machine comes with maybe 4, I don't remember, Janome branded needles. And I noticed that I wasn't having a problem with those, but I was with my like go-to Schmetz. So I did some research and it turns out that Janome branded needles are made by Oregon, who's a large-scale needle manufacturer. And so I bought some Oregon needles, or you could buy Janome needles as well, but the Oregon needles are quite inexpensive and easy to buy in bulk. And to be fair, I've broken very few needles in the last year. So who knows if I actually needed it in bulk, but it's a good idea to change your needles. So for just regular sewing, quilting cotton or whatever, I use these Oregon 90-14 sized, and then they're HAX1. I'll put a link to these, here if I put it in front of my face will focus. I'll put a link to these in the description. I bought a package of 100, although they come in like individual packages of 10. Dropping things again. So these are my like regular kind of universal needles. They're quite inexpensive and I really like them. For thick bag making, as we've discussed, I like to use faux leather, or also known as vinyl. I like to use foam interfacing because that's what gives me the loft for the quilting. So these seams can get really bulky, and when you start doing the straps, and in particular when you're connecting the straps, things can get really quite thick. That is an easy way to break needles. And I got size 116 needles and these HLX5. I'll put a link for these in the description as well. I got those and I don't think I've broken a single one. They've worked really well. I've gotten through some really thick seams and I've been really happy with them. So when you have a thicker gauge needle and you're going through something thick, you are reducing the chances that your needle will, you are increasing the chances that your needle will go straight down instead of like deflecting through the thick stuff, and that means that you are less likely to hit the needle plate and break a needle. So I really like these size 16 needles. These HLX5s are like promoted for being for the straight stitch machines, like the Janome HD9 or 1600, but I haven't had any problems with them in this machine at all, and they work great. I think they're supposed to be stronger, maybe, even than the regular size 16s, but I can't speak to that. When it comes to sewing knits, I like stretch needles, and these are Schmetz needles, and I haven't had a problem with them, which makes me wonder if I should try some of the other Schmetz needles. These are Schmetz Stretch 90-14s, and I've had really good luck with those, although I have broken more of them. But I think that's a me problem, not not a them problem. They work just fine in the machine. I don't have skip stitches or anything like that, which is also really nice if you're sewing through elastic. You can get more skipped stitches that way, and I haven't noticed that with those stretch needles. So I'm not sure why the stretch Smets needles work and the like Microtex and regular ballpoint ones, not ballpoint, universal needles caused me problems. I've also talked to other owners of the 6700P, and they haven't had a problem with Smets needles, so that might not be universal. But if you buy one and you're having skip stitches and you're freaking out like I was, try the organ needles or the Janome branded needles and see if that helps you out. That is what like was built, like the machine was built for. So if you have trouble, start there before you panic. Amazon sells them, they come really fast. So hopefully you don't have to panic for long. The other thing is the AccuFeed Flex Feet. So I've touched on why I love those, but I haven't given an enormous description really of how I use them and what some tips that I have learned. So this is, as we mentioned, the regular one. The way these work is that there's a place for the normal, you know, screw to go in here, just like any other foot that you're used to. But then there's this hook that hooks into the back, and this hook causes these top feed dogs to walk in conjunction with the movement of the machine. So the regular one has this 9mm hole and then feed dogs on the side like a regular walking foot that you're used to does. And that works really well. It moves the fabric well. It's awesome. But for some things, it's too wide and it's too bulky. So this has been a problem for me in bag making, especially when you're trying to get like up close to zipper tabs. There is a lot of space between the furthest position that your needle can get to and like and there's just this much bulky space that can really mean that you can't get like up nice and close to a raised area like a zipper tab. And for that, I love that there are different AccuFeed Flex feet. This one is attached to my machine. Give me a second and I will unscrew it and I will show it to you. I should have done that ahead of time, but here we are. So let me pause real quick and do that. All right, I've gotten it unscrewed. It's worth mentioning that this foot is sold separately. The first one I showed you comes with the machine. This one is sold separately, but I bought it. This is part of the reason I bought this machine, and so I bought it immediately because I knew I needed it. I knew that it was important for the sewing that I wanted to do. So this is much narrower. Oops, dropping it. Okay, so instead of the feed dogs next to it, it's just kind of a big clumpy one from behind, but it still helps move the fabric. And it's got the 9mm width here, but you can see how close you can get up to something and still have that needle position. It's really awesome. The other thing is that there is an additional toe that you can buy for this one, which is a zipper foot. So you don't need the rest. You use the same body here, but a separate toe. And you can see it's a zipper foot and you can get right up next to something if you want to. I did buy this. This is again a separate purchase from this. I bought this and I have to say I almost never use it, even though I put zippers in all of the time. it's just that I can get so close with this foot here and I just don't change it out. But I'm glad to have this, and you know, it's a great part of my arsenal even if I don't use it very often. But I actually put zippers in with this narrow foot or the regular foot all of the time, and I don't have a problem. The walking feet help you like get through it, and so but if you want a zipper toe, really useful. As I mentioned, there is a AccuFeed Flex version of the high performance foot for the piecing. As I mentioned, I don't have it. I do really want to get it. It works the same way as this one, where it's got like kind of a big clumpy one in the back instead of two on the side, but it means that you can get right up. You know, it's not causing the like all the distance that you need. So those AccuFeed Flex feet are amazing. I use them for pretty much every seam I sew. The only exceptions are not even seams. Putting buttons in, so you can look at the promotional material. It comes with a bunch of feet, many of which I never use. But I do use the button foot, and then I do free motion quilt, and I use the foot that comes with that for free motion quilting. There's not a lot to say about free motion quilting, by the way, in terms of tips. I know that people are really worried about free motion quilting, but it works really well on here. There's a lever over here that drops the feed dogs. I don't find that that causes a problem in tension. I know that's a thing some people worry about, but I haven't noticed that, and you can still change the stitch position so that you can get your needle right where you want it. But I honestly don't have a lot of like tips to give you for free motion quilting on this machine because it just works. So if you like to free motion quilt, go for it. If you are interested in learning how to free motion quilt, there are a lot of great YouTubers out there who are proficient at teaching that. My personal favorite is Leah Day. She has taught me so much. She is a great resource. She's been on YouTube for a long time and has dedicated so much effort to teaching people how to free motion quilt. So check out Leah Day. I'll put a link below for her YouTube channel, but she is an amazing resource. And if you want to learn how to free motion quilt and how to set up your machine for free motion quilting, check her out. She is the best. One tip though to know about the AccuFeed feet, which if you remember is theoretically what I'm talking about, is this is for bag makers specifically. I have a hard time believing it would happen to anybody else. But if you have a very thick seam and you have your AccuFeed foot on there and it's too high, it can push this hook out from the back of the machine where it's supposed to be. So pay attention is all I have to say. It's still so worth it in my opinion. I love the walking foot action, but when I was a beginner, I hadn't yet tuned myself in to be paying attention for that as a possibility. Now when I know that I'm going over something thick, it's usually like when you're like having like crossing seams, like that extra double thickness or whatever, this can disengage. And if you're paying attention, it's not a big deal. You can hear, like it gets clankier. You can hear a change. And if you're watching the feed dogs with your eyes, it'll like kick up like that and won't be moving the fabric anymore, and you can see it. So if you're watching, and mostly I do it when I know something thick is coming out. When I'm just doing regular seams, I don't worry about it and just listen. But if that happens and you catch it, and you don't have to take anything apart, you don't have to break thread, you can just stop and like by hand just hook it back into the back of the machine where it's supposed to go and keep going. It's not a huge deal, it's a little annoying, but it's still way better in my opinion than not walking. So that's not a problem you'd have with a regular foot because it doesn't hook in on the back, but I think it's so worth it. But that's just a heads up to bag makers. That's a thing that can happen. If you're listening and paying attention, you'll catch it pretty fast. And it won't be a big deal. Here's a tip for garment sewers. There haven't been a lot of things specific to that in this video because mostly it just works really well and there's not a lot to say. However, for thin fabrics like this bamboo that I'm wearing, and honestly I do it for all garment sewing that I do. I'm embarrassed to show you this. I use a scrap piece of fabric to start my seams. And as you can tell, I just use the same one over and over again, although I've got a bunch. This is the one that's handy. So, because you're using the wide zigzag plate and a zigzag stitch, and if you're using a light material, the machine might try to eat the beginning of your fabric, and that's really annoying and not the look you're going for. But if you have a piece of fabric, I usually do something thicker and sturdier, although this is still knit. If you start in the middle, so not at an edge, if you start in the middle and you sew off, and then you sew onto your seam that you're actually trying to sew, and you kind of like, you don't pull, but you use the scrap to keep tension on the like bobbin and top threads, then your seam will go through smoothly and you're way less likely to get the beginning of it eaten by the like bobbin case. So I really recommend that. Makes a huge difference for me, and it's really easy. I'm certain you have scraps. If you're cutting out fabric, you have scraps, and that just makes it a lot better. I have found for zigzagging that it's better to slow down. That's an instance in which I do move the speed lower because I'm a little bit of a speed demon, so I kind of have to control it from there because I like to go fast. But for zigzagging thin knits, I find that it's better to go slower or to stabilize them in some way. I haven't had a lot of thread jams in the last year, but nearly all of the ones I've had have been zigzagging thin fabrics. So if you slow down, I find that it's way less likely to happen. And I don't think I've had any really with like regular straight stitching. So I don't know what it is about that, but if you go slower, if you use a scrap, both of those things help slow down. The last tip that I have is about the bobbin case. So here I am. So this is a horizontal bobbin. And this piece here is called the bobbin case. And it's what the top thread goes around to make the stitch. I have noticed that this plastic is pretty malleable, and it means that if you have a problem with your, like, while you're sewing and it involves a thread jam and your needle hits something it shouldn't or whatever, you might damage the bobbin case a little, and it takes very little of like a burr or whatever in your bobbin case for your top thread to catch on it while it's trying to make a stitch and for you to like continue having thread jams. And the first time this happened to me, I was horrified, and I didn't know what to do, and I went here on YouTube and I found that you pretty much just, you're not going to be able to see any of this on the black plastic, I don't think, but you just feel, and like I found like a place where my needle or something in the bobbin case, I don't really know what, had gouged a spot into my bobbin case, and it was creating a roughness that the thread was then catching on. So the downside of it being malleable is that that seems to be more likely to happen than it did on my last machine, which was also a horizontal bobbin, a drop-in bobbin. But on the plus side, it's really easy to smooth that out because, you know, it's flexible. So for small ones, I can just take my fingernail and kind of rub it smooth, and that works fine. When I had a slightly bigger rough thing, I used a nail file and just smoothed it down, and that made the top thread go around smoothly again. So I just tell you this not because I think that like it's a huge flaw in the machine, but that it can be a kind of a scary thing to experience. And if you go in armed knowing that it's like a pretty simple fix, then you'll be less scared if it happens to you. So I also suspect that in Janome's worldview, these are semi-replaceable parts. I've looked at the parts lists and they seem to be about $30. I've been meaning to buy like a spare because I go through some rough things sometimes, and also I don't know what I would do if I had to wait for a new bobbin case to ship. I'd be really sad. So I kind of want to have one waiting in the wings. But, so, you know, it's not like so fragile that like, I mean, I've gone through a year of tough sewing because in 2020 I sewed a lot. And this bobbin case is still good to go. But that is something worth noting. I wonder if it's true of some of the other drop-in bobbin Janomes. I don't know. It wasn't a problem I had with the 7700 when I owned that, but I could have just been lucky. I'm not sure. Just check for rough spots if you have problems. Try to smooth them out, and then the nice thing is that it drops right back in, and away you can go. Although I recommend that while you're in there, you take a brush and you clean out your bobbin area anyway, because that's a place where lint really builds up and can cause problems. Anyway, I know this has been a long video. I hope you found it helpful. Thanks for sticking with me if you made it to the end. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and I'd be glad to help you with them. There's a lot of things I also just didn't cover because they aren't relevant to my personal experience with the machine, but there's a whole box of goodies here that you can look up and see what's involved in that. And as I said, leave a comment if you have a question. I'd be glad to help you. It's really an amazing machine. I really love it. If you buy one, I hope it serves you well. And let me know in the comments too if you decide to get this one based on this or on other recommendations you got. I'm always really excited for other people to join the 6700P family. So if you do, welcome. If you decide that this is not the machine for you, there are plenty of reasons why that may be. I hope you enjoy whatever machine you end up getting. So anyway, I'm not going to be doing any other machine review videos because this is the machine I own and plan to continue owning, but I'm going to be doing a lot more craft videos here on this channel if you're interested in sewing, but also in other kinds of crafts. I'm not entirely sure, but subscribe and we can figure it out together. I'm really excited to be launching this YouTube channel and I hope that you would join me. Lately I'm personally really into learning how to brush letter. I always loved free motion quilting, and I've gotten really into like the world of planners. So that's some ideas of things that might be going on here, but only time will tell. So hit the subscribe button if you're interested in spending more time with me. If not, go forth into the world in sewing peace. Have a great day. Bye.